Hi there, and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you don't already know me, my name is Daniel Pinault, and I'm a longtime Microsoft Access MVP. As you can see on the screen, the subject today is subforms in obviously a parent form. One of the biggest issues that often occurs is users will jump in because of whatever reason and decide they want to put in information in a subform, even though the main form still hasn't been populated. So in the context of what I'm talking about here, let's go to a demo. If we look at the default behavior, so what I have here is just a simple contact form, so based off of the contact table. And then I have a subform here for telephone numbers. So a secondary table, we use a subform for that. Now what happens in a normal scenario is you would come here, you would enter the name, and then once you've entered the name, you'd come and populate the rest of the relevant information. But in many instances, I've seen it multiple times, people will just get a sheet of paper that they're trying to transcribe into a database, and they may just choose, I want to start by using the telephone number, let's say. And I'll fill in the rest of the information afterwards, no big deal, because they don't understand there's relationships going on here. They don't understand that it isn't like Excel where it doesn't make a difference where you start typing. So they'll just start typing, and boom, they get hit with this beautiful error, which is this guy here. So it's error 3314, and as you can see, it gives you this generic error message. You must enter a value in, and then a string that means nothing to nobody, certainly not your users, field. And your only choice is okay. You have no other options. And so the only way around this when you're here is you press OK, and then you've got to press undo 3 times to make it go away, or else the error is always there. Now, no user is going to be aware of this. Very few people are going to know, hey, I have to press undo 3 times. So today's discussion is how do we get around this problem, since this isn't an issue with our users, and deliver them a good user experience with your form. Now, you can go through the article. Everything is there. The code, I go over it all. Don't worry. You can just copy paste what you need. So I'm not going to delve into the article too much. It's all here for you to explore. And like I say, copy and paste. One thing I have at the very bottom here is there is an issue. We're going to discuss it in a minute. So I've created a feedback item. I'd ask anyone that's able to just quickly upvote it. And hopefully the Microsoft development team will eventually, resolve this issue for us. Okay, enough chit chat. So we've seen what happens. Now, what isn't desirable here? And like I said, all someone has to do is follow the proper sequence. Once the primary key has been issued, when they click here, now they're good to make their entry and we have no problem. Okay, so the issue is when people don't follow the right flow, then obviously you get into problems. And you can't go anywhere else. You can't do anything else until you resolve that issue, which is Control Z 3 times. You'll also sometimes see people they'll put in this and, oh, well, okay, and I can't get out of it. They get frustrated and they just try to close out of it. And they'll just say yes to this, just to make it all go away. Like I say, none of this is a desirable user experience, certainly not for my users. So I have several options available to us. So let's look at them in a certain order. We can follow the order here on the article. Do nothing. Well, as I say in the article, that isn't an option, well, at least not according to me. So we can also trap the error in the subform. So what does that mean? So we can come in and we can set ourselves up so when the user makes an entry, we trap it ourselves and return a more comprehensible error message. You must first fill in the contact name before providing telephone number information. Now that a user can understand, okay? We're heading in the right direction, but there's a big problem that still remains. We can't, through VBA code automation, undo that change that they've made. So they're still faced with this issue that they can't get out of this bloody form. And they need to know to do the Control Z 3 times, which in my mind is still not a solution. So there is a second approach for trapping this error. So the first thing I'm going to do, well, first let's look at the code I was currently using. If you look here, we have to pick our subform. If you take your subform, I was currently using the onError event, and I had hoped that was going to be the proper approach. And if you look at the code, you'll see I tried all sorts of things for undoing the entry. Nothing works, okay? So you can give it a whirl yourself, but none of this works. So the solution that I came up with is forget the onError because it doesn't get us to where we need to be. And instead, we need to switch and use the before insert event. So we're going to catch this problem before it even occurs, before it gets sent to the database to be committed. So we're going to validate that we have what we need before we can continue. So we've just implemented that event. We'll go to a new record. I'll start typing. And as soon as I start typing, you're going to get, you must fill in the contact name, blah, blah, blah. That's perfect. My users can understand that message. I press OK. And I even put a set focus back onto my main form. Now we're talking. Nothing was committed. No entry was made. So there's no worries about the undo. That's all taken care of. And I'm even redirecting my user to where they need to be to do their data entry. So this here is an approach that, in my opinion, works, makes sense. What else can we do? Well, if we come back here, disable the subform until the parent is initiated. Okay. So if I look here, I have the enabled version. So let's take a look at that. So if you come here, let's take a new entry. We'll do, where are we here? Dwayne. And I've made an entry. I can start typing. Everything's glorious. It worked. I come to the case where we're making a new entry. The person skips over that, starts typing. They can't. In reality, they can't even click anything in this form because it is disabled. The problem I have with this approach, and let me demonstrate to you. Let's edit this for 2 seconds. Let's take the last name. Let's disable that guy. Okay? So I'm doing the exact same thing I'm doing to my subform. I'm disabling a control. Look at the difference in the disabled controls. Okay, we have a text box control and label that are disabled. It's clearly visually easy to identify that it's disabled and I can't use it. And yet the control, the subform control, which is disabled, doesn't exhibit that at all. It still is of appearance that is fully functional and accessible, and it isn't. And users can get frustrated with this because what is wrong? I'm trying to click here, it's not working, and they can get very frustrated. So to me, this isn't the best approach. Yeah, it works, it avoids the issue, but it still isn't the best approach. Okay, let's look at the code very quickly. You'll see it's very, very simple to do. I'm going to re-enable this guy. If we look at the code, we're using 3 different events. So, and 3 lines of VBA. We're using the before insert again. So as soon as an entry is made in our main form, we're re-enabling our subform, which makes sense. We've made an entry, therefore a primary key has been issued, so the master-child link between the form and subform can be established properly, so we enable it. The form current, so as we go record to record, when we're switching between records, retrieving a record, is going to check and enable the subform based on the fact that there's a primary key issued. So the primary key in all of these cases is the link between the master and the child, between the parent form and the subform. So that's why I'm using the contact ID. So I'm just validating, Do I have a primary key issued, which means the record has been committed and created? If it has, then we're going to enable it. If this doesn't exist yet, so we're on a new record that hasn't been dirtied, information hasn't been input about the contact, first name, last name, well, then it's going to be disabled. This will be false. And similarly, we're going to do more or less the exact same thing here for the form undo, because a user could start typing in a value for, let's say, a name, realize they made a mistake and do undo, and because they started typing, the before insert fired it and unlocked that subform. Well, we need to lock it down again because they undid it. So that's why we add the form undo, and it's going to similarly work, but this time it's going to use the contact ID field, yes, but it's going to use the old value because you're reverting back to the old value. So that's what we're going to validate against, is the old value that we're stepping back to. And that's it. Super, super easy using the enabled. Okay. But like I said, in my personal opinion, my personal view, this is not ideal. It's a step in the right direction, but we're not there yet. Then we get into what about hiding it altogether? Hide the subform. So we get into the contact visible. So I come here, and as you can see, it's visible, it's visible. We go on a new record, it isn't even there anymore. And this avoids the entire issue. The user can't accidentally go in the wrong place, can't go fill in the wrong data. To me, this is a solution. And as soon as they start writing something, okay, then it becomes available to them to then now start making their entry. So you're going to see here, let's go to the code. We'll right click, design view, and it's the exact same procedures because it's basically the same thing. We're just using a different property. So identical code, the only thing that changes is now instead of enabled, we're using visible. And like I said, for me, this is probably the best solution. Now, I wanted to dabble a little bit, so I took things a little bit further. And I decided to explore subclassing a form. So later in my article, if you look at it, so I go over these approaches and whatnot, and I get into form subclassing. So what are we talking about form subclassing? Well, let's look at a contact subclassing the visible. So we're using the exact same approach, well, global approach, which is hiding the subform. But let's look at what we're doing in the code. I no longer have the onCurrent. I no longer have, the undo, and all I have now is an open and a close event. And you're also going to notice that now I have two subforms. I've now added an extra element just to illustrate something. So let's look at the code. Let's just pull up here. What am I doing? Well, at the top here, I'm creating a new class. Okay, and if you look at my class modules, I have a matching class form, class form. In the opening, I'm setting a property of that class. And in the close, I'm clearing that variable. Okay, so basically, it all comes down to one line. So what is this line? What does it do exactly? Well, it's very, very simple. Let's go to the class because everything is controlled and managed in the class. I'm creating a with events for the access form. Okay. I have a collection variable here. You'll see why in a couple seconds. And I just created a generic constant which equals a string. Okay. Instead of retyping the string everywhere, I'm just using this constant. Now, I created two properties. I created a set for this form variable, and I set up a get for that exact same form variable. What does it do? Well, the set one takes an argument, a form, an access form that it's an argument that's going to be input. And it's going to take that, whatever I've passed to it, that form variable, and it's going to set oForm equal to it. Now remember, oForm here is a module level variable representing a form. So basically we're passing it a form, so the class now has a form variable to work with. So if you remember, we go back to our subclassing, that's what I do here. Set the p form equal to me, the current form. So I'm setting this guy here to the current form that I'm on at the opening of that form. So then now I have my variable representing that form that I'm currently in, that the rest of the code can now work off of. The next thing in that set is I call my initialization routine. Now, this could be all sorts of things, but in the context of what we're talking about, I did a couple things. The first thing I did is I'm going to use that collection variable up here. Why? What I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through all the variables, or should I say all the controls on the form that I've passed. So my oForm that I passed to it, which now in this context of the class is called oForm. So I'm going to go through all the controls on oForm one by one. I'm trying to identify the ones by control type that are subforms, because that's what I'm interested in the context of our present discussion. Obviously, you want to automate other aspects, you would do it differently. But what I'm after here is controlling subforms. So I created a variable, and I'm going to populate that collection with all of my subform controls. So now I've got this module level variable that houses all of the subforms for my form. So that's going to be something that's going to help me later. The next thing I do, I just left a couple other examples here just to give you some ideas of what else you can attack, because you can do whatever you want. But remember, for my visible, to control the visibility of the subform, we use 3 events. We use the before insert, the on current, and the undo. And now I'm passing it that constant from up here, which represents event procedure. So I'm setting now through this class those events. So although they don't exist in the form natively, I, through the class, am creating them. And that's the beauty of it. And then I have a class terminate just to wipe out some variables. It's house cleaning. Now, the next step is, we're saying here there's event procedures for each of these events. We now have to create them, but in our class. So that's what you see down here. I'm creating these 3 events. So I'm creating an oForm, which represents our current form, before insert, an oForm current, an oForm undo. And each one of them, the way I approached it, is I'm now going to loop through my collection of subforms, which we created here, our global collection. So I'm going to loop through them, and for each subform, I'm going to build that command, this command here, or this command here. So I'm going to now build that event for each subform that's found on the form. And similarly for the current, similarly for the undo. And that's it. So basically what I'm saying, by calling this, it goes and creates all of this through VBA. So we don't have to now do this manually ourselves. Why? Some of you will be looking at this saying, whoa, that's a lot of code. It's getting complex. I'm a little lost. Why do we want to do this? Because now I can implement this class with 2 lines, okay, two events, should I say, on any form. And now I have the same behavior guaranteed. And if I want to change something, the beauty now is all I do is come change here, and all the forms where I've implemented this would instantaneously be updated. So I no longer have to update multiple forms. I just have to update one location in my class. So it makes it much more easy, or should I say easier, to manage and to update and to, when your clients give you new requests or want changes implemented, it simplifies your life as a developer. The other beauty, if we look at this very quickly, Now go back to the form for just 2 seconds. Remember, I have 2 subforms. Yet in my code, nothing changed. Whether I have 1, 2, 40, 100 subforms, it changes nothing. My initialization will always remain this. And in reality, I'm not even changing my class, because my class, remember, I'm looping through every subform found. So it will automatically adapt to as many subforms as I put in that main form. So let's just very quickly confirm that I'm not lying to you guys. So as you can see, they're visible. Everything's glorious. And if we go to a new entry, they are not. As soon as I start typing a letter and it gets populated with a contact ID, they become available for entry. And there you go. So you've seen multiple approaches, as you can see. Very simple, no rocket science here. The basic approach is very manageable. If you want to copy paste this into your forms, go for it. It works. There's nothing wrong with doing it this way. But if you want to push things a little further, you also want to explore a little bit about subclassing, because it can be a very interesting and powerful tool. Well, then take a look at the subclassing code. I'll also just quickly mention to you, here I'm talking about subclassing at the form level. So form events, that's what I was after. But do know, and maybe I'll do another video at a later date, you can easily also subclass controls. So if you wanted to add all sorts of automation and customized behaviors for text boxes, combo boxes, whatever it could be, you can do that. And like I say, it can enable you to standardize things throughout your application very easily, and then gives you one central location to make a change. Let's say the color of buttons. Well, you could have a class where you've defined all your buttons and your client says, I want to change the color, and you just go into your class, change it in one spot, and all of your buttons would instantaneously be updated, for instance. So just know, we're talking in this discussion about forms, but it can go well beyond that, and you can do some truly amazing things with subclassing. So that's the bulk of how we can address the dreaded pain in the butt error 3314 and these generic error messages that truly mean nothing to the end user. They mean something to me as a developer. I understand what it's talking to, but you can be sure that your end user has no clue what the heck contact telephone contact ID means, and let alone where he'd find it to edit it or populate it. So now you've got several different approaches to get around it, and per the usual, all the code, everything is in the article. Just simply copy paste and you're done. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for spending a couple of minutes of your day with me. Greatly appreciated. Like always, like, subscribe, share. Anything you can do to promote my channel is greatly appreciated. And we'll see you in the next one, everyone. Take care. Have a good day.